Secretary General Rodney Taylor, you represent the Telecommunication Union for Caribbean. It's a pleasure to have you here on this plenary session held in Romania, a premiere for our country, a premiere for Europe after 30 years. It's a privilege to have you here, and thank you for accepting to talk to Habits by Republica.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here in beautiful Bucharest.
The reason why we wanted to talk to you regards a different perspective that you can add to our readers with regards to this digital world in Caribbean, and especially to the digital education part of it, because digital is going to be touching every aspect of our life, but in order to be able to use the devices and this world, you need to have a digital education. So how do you look at these things in Caribbean? What are the opportunities and the risks that you see?
So thank you for the question. Of course, when we're talking about education and digital skills, in part it is about how do we get people, ordinary citizens, especially those who have not grown up in using the technology, how do we get them to be comfortable using the technology, interacting with it, and using it in a meaningful way. There's also the aspect in terms of using the tools to deliver education as well, in new and interesting ways, so that you capture the interests of the young people and you're able to display or demonstrate that information in meaningful ways, right? That allows them to interact with past, with history, for example. So it's much more interesting than reading a textbook, right? They can see rich images, they can see historical footage, or they can interact in virtual worlds, and so that it is much more engaging. But I think the challenge of digital skills would be more for, say, the older generation. I would say anyone probably past 40, which I'm sure makes up a large segment of our population. How do we get them comfortable, and how do we get them to speak the language, to be comfortable interacting with a mobile phone or with a government service that has been placed online? How can they interact with their children who are using this technology now on an almost constant basis, communicating with their friends, so that in a sense there isn't that divide between the older and the younger generation. We're all on the same page moving forward. Yeah. So this is an issue just in the Caribbean, it's an issue everywhere, issue of digital skills, and how do we bring the older generation on board, but also how do we leverage technology to promote education as well.
Thank you. And in your work, if you would name the number one topic on your agenda, and a number two topic on your agenda, number three topic on your agenda, so what concerns you with regards to the work you do in the Caribbean?
Well, connectivity and meaningful connectivity is important. So actual access, in particular for those persons who don't have access. So there's still a large segment of the global population, and some of those reside in the Caribbean. I'm sure some of them reside here in Europe, some reside in Africa. In particular, it's a problem for developing countries. So while we're talking about all of the benefits, the wonderful benefits of this technology, there's still a large number of people who don't have access to the internet. Now, if you can imagine that if you're accustomed to having internet access, imagine that it goes away for a couple of days, the anxiety, the stress of not being able to check your emails or be able to work, and so on. So, but that's a persistent state for many people around the world. So they're missing out on opportunities for education, economic opportunities, because as you know, many businesses are run on the internet, or it enables especially small and medium enterprises and micro enterprises economic opportunities. So priority one is really to get the rest of the unconnected connected, and that is a big part of the discussion taking place here. But it has to be meaningful connectivity. So even for those persons that do have internet access, what is the quality of that access? What is the cost of that access? It may be a large portion of their income, and so it becomes a burden. And if you're choosing between food, internet access, of course, food is the higher priority if you're paying your bills. And so to make that access meaningful, to make it affordable and meaningful. And then, of course, then you move beyond that so that they're able to use it in meaningful ways, whether it's to drive a business or to educate themselves so that they improve their economic opportunities. So those are sort of some of the priorities. So we're talking about the connectivity, meaningful connectivity, the digital skills that goes along with that so that they can use it in a meaningful way. Those are some of the priority areas for us as well.
You mentioned affordability. I think that's important in this part of the world as is important in many parts of the world. Digital is not cheap. It doesn't come. Smartphones are not cheap, etc. So in order to have access to this world of opportunities, one needs to be able to afford. So how is that mitigated in your region? What plans and what ideas?
So that will take a collaborative effort. There are different ways of approaching it. Certainly on the connectivity side, there are options, for example, like establishing universal service funds. So you take a portion of funds, set aside a portion of funds from the operators, right, the mobile, the telecoms operators, and you set that aside for communities where it's not feasible to run they say the fiber cables to that community or to provide wireless access to that community, and it is subsidized. So really you're talking about subsidizing or providing incentives for operators to invest in those areas, even if it is perhaps a reduction in taxes, for example. And certainly on the devices side, it calls for a global effort with manufacturers of those devices to be able to produce devices at a reasonable cost. We don't all have to have the latest iPhone or the latest Samsung. We just need a nice mobile phone that gives me access to all the services that I need. So I would say it's a collaboration, and the ITU itself has launched an initiative called Partner to Connect, and it allows for private sector, civil society to come up with ways to help improve that connectivity problem. Because you touched on the connectivity, and that is something we've heard through and through this session, the sessions as well. The 2 billion people that still are left to be connected in the world. Is digital good always? Well, it's always a question of whether it's good or it's bad or it's just how it is used, right? So there are obviously advantages and benefits to this digital connectivity. Communication is a big one. The ability to communicate with our loved ones that we take for granted. We cannot just do, we can do beyond a voice call, we can do all video calls, so you're sharing your experience. While I'm here in Romania, I'm sharing my experience with my family on a daily basis, right? We take that for granted, but it is something that the technology affords us. We can continue to do business in our, I'm based in Trinidad and Tobago, so I'm communicating with my team, I'm still doing work as though I am in Trinidad and Tobago. So the communication remains very high in terms of the benefits of this technology. As I mentioned before, the ability to do business, to advertise your business or to sell goods or services online from your home. Provides tremendous opportunities as well. Now, disadvantages, of course, for many of our young people, sometimes they get addicted to it. They identify with these social media platforms, and so on. There may be implications for the development, for their social interaction. It is not as when we were growing up, spent a lot of time outdoors, flying kites, riding bicycles, and doing, I don't know what is done in Romania, but
it's the same. It's
the same.
Issue
I
here.
imagine so, yes. But that calls for a different type of social interaction as opposed to being on your phone. And very often you see families around the dinner table or out to dinner, but everyone is on the phones, all right? So that's a negative in my view, because it does curtail the social and human interaction that is so critical for our development.
That's true. And to finish our short discussion on a humanistic note, what was the thing that you noticed as different and significant about Romania?
Well, I don't know, so it's different, but the Romanians are very friendly people, so that's the same as in the Caribbean, so that's a good thing. Beautiful architecture. I unfortunately haven't really gotten out to do much. I wanted to do the salt mines. I don't know if I'll have the opportunity to do that, some of the castles as well. But just walking around along the streets, friendly people, beautiful architecture, and it's because I'm staying in the old town, I feel as though I'm living in a bit of history.
Well, thank you so much for your kindness. Thank you, and for the interview.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
Vă mulțumim că ne-ați urmărit, sperăm că v-a fost de folos și vă invităm în comunitatea noastră a Societății Omului Sănătos.